Welcome to the EcuTek RaceROM webinar. This section deals specifically with the Subaru BRZ, Toyota 86 and Scion FR-S.
EcuTek, we have our own development vehicle. It is, so drag and drop the ROM here. It is a Toyota version, Toyota 86. The RaceROM feature file was our second major development for Subarus. It's got more features than the STI has, and we do hope to upgrade the STI with some of the features certainly that the BRZ has in the future. Quite a few people asking for the features that you'll now see in the BRZ in the STIs, and we need to decide what's the most important thing for us to do next. So your input on these sort of things is valued, let's say. So at the moment, standard, this is a Euro BRZ STI. The ECU ROMs in the STI, the 86 and the Scion FR-S are all the same. It's all Denso ECU and familiar really crossover from the STI, with the main difference being the direct injection, the Toyota-based port injection and direct injection system that's been used by Subaru. Okay, so standard ROM files, standard maps functions. Purpose of the webinar is for RaceROM, so we can add RaceROM feature file. We navigate to our special folder I've prepared earlier, and we can see the RaceROM feature file shown here. So, adding this RaceROM feature file version 12103, we can see it's got custom maps, it's got four-way map switching, launch control, flat foot shift, auto blip, per gear rev limits, custom parameter login, as well as ECU ROM security. We apply the patch and we see lots of feature updates. We go to EcuTek RaceROM Maps, expand, order. So let's follow. So first one, map switch mode. So BRZ, we have map switching. Unlike the STI, where we have two lots of map switching indicated by a flashing check engine light, with the BRZ 86, EcuTek taking it one stage further, we now have four sets of maps that we can switch between, and map switching is indicated with control of the tacho, the rev counter. So it makes it much clearer for us to see which mode we're in. It makes us much quicker from swapping between the modes. That's quite impressive as well. So to enable special features, we can control the special features in either of the four modes. So set up here, probably most of you guys have already seen this, but you can turn on the special features in any of the four modes. The maps available for map switching is ignition base map, as discussed with the STI, and ignition advanced map. Being naturally aspirated, you notice the engine load scaling is not as high as it was on the STIs. Without a turbo, it wasn't needed to be rescaled. It's still being rescaled to 1.4 engine load, a couple of pounds boost, but you guys with forced induction cars are probably going to have to have rescaled the maps to around 2 or 2.5 engine load for most applications, around 0.7, 10 psi, 0.7 bar. So ignition map, quite straightforward there. Decimal points, decrease it, fewer significant points, control F, makes it smaller, makes it easier to visualize. Okay, so we have now four sets of ignition maps. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a base map. We're specifically in the RaceROM category at the moment, so only 3 ignition maps are shown, or ignition advanced maps that I've opened there. only 3 of them are shown because we're in the RaceROM category. If we want to see all the ignition maps available, then maps by function, we go to ignition timing. We can see here lots of maps. If we add user level, like I said earlier, then we'll see the maps generally that we should be tuning are the maps in beginner mode. And we can see, because of origin, the OEM maps are the factory maps that we use in mode 1, and the RaceROM maps are the additional maps that EcuTek have coded, that EcuTek have added. So ignition advanced, that's mode 1, mode 2, and so on. So if you have rescaled lots of maps, bear in mind that you want to do all your tuning. If you copy and paste in, creating a new ROM file from scratch for some reason, do put all your maps in first, then apply your RaceROM feature file so it copies your ignition base map, your advanced map, your fuel map into all the other 4 maps. The base strategy on Subarus is basically is the VVT working or not. VVT has a major influence on volumetric efficiency. When the VVT is not working, things really start to go wrong. So the other definitions more on the STI is with TGV, that's what we're governed about, another big effect on VE. So Subaru set up the ROM files with several different maps. Basically, is the VVT working or not? 98% of the time the VVT is going to be working, so it's going to be using the VVT on maps. It's worth noting that with RaceROM, when you map switch, it will always use that ignition map. So if you map switch to mode 2, mode 3 or mode 4, then that is the ignition map that is being used. So in the event that the VVT fails, and a fail-safe condition, it will not go back and use the VVT off. The way we've had to code it is that's your ignition map, that's the one that's going to be used. There's situations on some vehicles where there's like 6 or 8 different maps the ECU will swap between for various different conditions, load and neutral and engine cold, VVT working. We have to simplify it with RaceROM, and we give you one map. If you're in mode 2, it's going to be using this advanced map and this base map all the time. So you need to bear that in mind when you're doing calibrations, that we do lose some of the functionality of the factory ECU. Although, if the light comes on and the customer's got a tuned car, hopefully he'll have the sense to lift off the power to protect the engine, basically, rather than relying on a factory default fail-safe set of maps that might save his car with big injectors, big turbos, etc. So, okay, back to RaceROM. Navigation here using the cursor keys again. So we have map switching, ignition base map. So we've got the 4 ignition maps. Move on to fueling. For fuel maps, target AFR. Worth noting that these are not closed loop. Once in open loop, these maps are not necessarily what you're going to get. There's lots of factors that will affect these maps. I'll just say very quickly while we got the chance. So the factory map was calibrated at 12:1 like this. Then in closed loop you're going to get 14.7. Fuel trim is going to maintain lambda 1, stoichiometric 14.7. And on full load you're pretty much, if you've got an accurate MAF scale, which you're likely to from the factory, you're going to get 12:1 AFR. If you were to do something, help you understand, you do something like squash the fuel pressure in the vice. You take fuel pressure up from maybe 2.5 bar to 4.5 bar. In closed loop, the fuel trim will cope with it. It will take maybe -10, -15% away to hit your target 14.7. But in open loop, this map instantly becomes inaccurate. So if you squash the fuel pressure reg from 2.5 to 4.5 bar, the car's going to run rich. And just because the factory car delivers 12:1, with your higher fuel pressure, you're going to get 10:1. So this map will become inaccurate. It's a percentage of fuel enrichment factor over stoichiometric. We display it in AFR for simplicity to help everybody understand, and it works relatively well. That aside, if you fill this map with 12:1 and you're getting 10:1 or you're getting 14:1, then there's something wrong with the calibration. If you've got stock injectors, then it's purely going to be down to your MAF scaling, assuming there's nothing wrong with the car, like you've got leaky boost pipes, this sort of thing. then if you fill this map with 12 to 1, if you've got 10 to 1, then your map scale's overreading at that point. If you've got 14 to 1, then your map scale's underreading. And if you set this up at 12 to 1 and then keep power on in the car, looking at the log file, adjusting the map scale, and you get 12 to 1 afterwards, then when you're ready to tune, if you do fill it with 10 to 1, you will get 10 to 1. And if you fill it with 13 to 1, you're going to get 13 to 1 because your map scaling has been done correctly. All very well in an idealistic world, but it will if you apply that tuning factor when you have the time, you will find you can create very accurate map scales, and the fueling will do what you ask it to do every time. So 4 fuel maps, set them up how you choose. Ignition timing done. Now on BRZ and 86 we don't have map switching for other maps, maybe like VVT. So we removed that. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it. We do have to consider space in the ECU for stuff that we've done, but not everyone was using the map switching for things like VVT. So that's where custom maps really takes over. Now, as I said earlier, this is a subject for its own webinar really, so I'm not going to go into too much detail over it. But if you want to map switch, if you want different VVT advanced in mode 2, 3 or 4, then you can do it now using custom maps. You create the map yourself. Okay, next feature. So we've done map switching into special features. So as covered with the STI, we'll just go over it again. So the launch control on the BRZ 86 naturally aspirated is very similar to the STI as we've just discussed. So while we're in launch control, let me just make ignition timing while we're in launch control -20, maximum engage speed we've got to be below 8 kilometers an hour, rev limit base 4,000 RPM. That's important factor. Yeah, so launch control on the BRZ, we've got adjustable launch control and we can adjust it with the cruise control. So vehicles that have cruise control fitted, while we're in launch control, we can use the cruise control stalk to increase and decrease the launch control RPM. Point being, if you're at the track, maybe weather conditions, bit of rain, if you're getting too much wheel spin when you launch, then you can take the RPM down, therefore reducing engine torque, less slip. And if you're getting plenty of grip, tyres are nice and hot, nice sticky day, then you can take the RPM up, introduce more power, get a quicker launch. So RaceROM launch control, if you're not sure, we do have a video on the EcuTek YouTube channel. Progressive launch time, again it's time again. Rev limit hysteresis, will control how aggressive it is. And target AFR, applying a factor while in launch control. So reaching the car up basically while we're in launch control. Launch control adjustment amount, so 250 RPM. So every time we move the launch control RPM with the cruise control, maybe our launch control is 4,000. If we go up, it's going to go 4,250, 4,500, 4,700, 5,000, down again. And I'm pretty sure that's saved. So next time you launch it, will save that RPM. Flat foot shift, again as per the STI, no real difference here. We have a delay period actually. That in the next revision we will put a time period in there. One of the things with the BRZ 86 is that the clutch switch isn't actually at the top of the clutch pedal. So what can happen is we go to do a flat foot shift, and if we're quite slow and gentle with the clutch pedal, that the clutch will mechanically start to disengage before the clutch switch itself has been disengaged and the flat foot shift feature has been enabled. So we can put a small delay on I'm just checking it is that way around, so that we can get the timing right. I think it was about 0.3 of a second from my testing. Maybe somebody might just post what the settings they've been testing with are, to give you guys an idea. But basically improve the feature by adding a delay there before it kicks in. So it was the other way around, in fact. Yeah, what happens is the feature comes in, but the clutch is still engaged. Yeah, hope all goes well, Tom. Tom's off to the hospital. Looks like his wife's about to have a baby. Yeah, what can happen is the flat foot shift feature kicks in while the clutch is still engaged. So there's a delay period, so the clutch mechanically does engage before we apply the feature. That's what the delay one is. Hysteresis, the RPM, ignition time and retard as per STI. It's the retard during the flat foot shift. Xavier's just taken my mouse. Rev limit delta, the RPM, and the flat foot shift target AFR, same again. So we can have a different RPM delta amount depending on the current engine speed. Just trying to make the features as powerful as possible. We set them up, as I said, we set them up how we think they work well, but they're not always on the edge. But you know, you guys are the tuners, you're doing it day in, day out. Tell us what you need and we write it. By adding these settings into the software, we don't want to dictate what the settings are. We want to give you control of them, and you can set them up how you want to use them. Okay, if somebody has a different setting they feel is far superior and they want to share it, then please let us know. We'll test it, and if it's good, we'll add that setting into the next revision so everybody can benefit from it. The more people that have good settings, the better feedback we're going to get, and the better for all of us. Auto blip. So auto blips now become a 3D map, and there was a reason for it. I can't quite remember it at this time. We put it against time now and also against RPM, so it's much more controllability with the auto blip now. It's worth noting a few discussions with the dealers that the 86 and BRZ does have some kind of throttle adaptation, some throttle learning, and you will find that possibly when a car turns up that it's quite aggressive, it's quite lively, responsive to the accel pedal when you blip the engine, and then possibly after programming, reset ECU, that it's a bit more lethargic, it's a bit dampened, let's say. Speaking to a few tuners over the years, I'm sure that there is learning and strategies in there for adaptation. A few tuners swear by a certain procedure after programming the car, where after programming, reset the ECU, turn the ignition off, and basically the ECU wants to check the full swing range of the throttle. So after programming, ignition on, if you just push the accel pedal to the floor 4 or 5 times before starting the car, or some people power off the ignition again, power it on, do it again, then start the car, you'll find that the throttle is actually more responsive. Now, where I'm going with this is the auto pedal percentages that we include. You might well test them after you've programmed the ECU and they don't seem very aggressive. The auto blip might not seem that big. But if you don't go through a throttle learning sequence, that in 4 or 5 days, as the learning's taken effect, that the throttle's a lot sharper, a lot more aggressive, and then the car could, over rev from your initial settings. So initially, the auto blip is only going up maybe 1,000, 1,500 RPM more than your current RPM, but in 3 or 4 days' time, you might find it's 2,500, 3,000. So it's worth going through. First of all, our settings are normally quite conservative, and if you don't feel they're aggressive enough, just go through the learning sequence before you start, increasing the values, let's say. Okay. Throttle threshold, so we've got to be over 85% accel pedal for the features to work. Special feature options, so this is how we set up whether we want to use all 4 modes. It might be on the BRZ FR-S that we only want one mode. You might want 2, 3 or 4. This is where you set it up basically. Some cars don't have the cruise control. Things like RaceROM launch control can't work properly. In that case, we can use the map switching via the full throttle, full accel pedal and defog switch to map switch like we do on older Subarus. I believe that the check engine light flashes in that condition. I mean, I personally don't use it. We use the cruise control to map switch and use the rev counter tacho indication of what mode we're in. Cruise control stalk there. Also, where cruise control is not available, it makes it tricky to set up the launch control RPM. You can see at the bottom there the launch RPM. We can set the launch control while the feature is enabled, while it's active, by using cruise control. If we don't have it, we can use the defog and accel. So in this situation, say we want 4,000 RPM launch, then we would lift the RPM to 4,000, turn the defog off. I'd have to consult the manual just to say that's correct. Turn it off, and then next time we go into launch control, I think the sequence is you turn the heated rear window on, you lift the RPM, you turn the heated rear window off, and we set that then as your launch control RPM. So even guys without cruise controls can still adjust their launch RPM without needing a laptop or programming the ECU. That's covered in the RaceROM. I should have had a copy of this printed out ready. RaceROM feature file guide for setting up the launch control. Also, we can use the various traction control switches as different modes again. So if again we don't have cruise control, we can't map switch, we can set up the different modes in different switch positions. So we've got the normal, we've got the VSC, the stability control sport, traction control off, and the traction control and VSC off. We can set all those different switch configurations as our modes if we need them and we don't have cruise control. Thankfully, most of us have cruise control. Not that we ever use it for anything other than RaceROM special features. Okay. Wheel speed kph multiplier. Okay, this is tied up with the fuel economy display. Now this feature could have been so good. We did some quite trick stuff earlier on with it that sadly we had to pull until we can improve it. So we're using the fuel consumption meter, which is in the middle of the instrument cluster. It's a digital gauge, and we can use this. It's used by the factory ECU to show fuel economy, but we can use it as a performance meter, i.e. 0 to 60, 0 to 100. So we can use it as a performance meter, but one of the difficulties with it is the engine ECU and ABS ECU are constantly trying to control the fuel consumption meter to show you your cruise control. When EcuTek takes control to show you your 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 time, we have to battle with engine ECU and ABS ECU output to keep that value constant on the screen. So it's quite tricky to do. We've got it working quite well now. We also displayed one of the other trick features was we were displaying air fuel ratio, and we were displaying boost pressure on there. That again was working well, but one of the downsides of the feature is the fuel gauge itself, the analog fuel gauge, shows is adjusted from the fuel consumption meter. So what we were finding initially during our testing is you'd be driving along and you'd be doing your 0 to 60s, or you'd be doing your air fuel ratio or boost pressure, even knock retard we used. You'd be watching this and the ECU thinks, oh, the fuel consumption's terrible, and the fuel gauge would drop down to 0. The guys, you've suddenly run out of fuel, but you know you've still got 3/4 of a tank. One of the annoying parts is the only way to reset the gauge was either fill the car up with fuel so the gauge goes up, or disconnect the battery, put it back on, and it would reset the sensor as well. So we had to pull those features. We're hoping in the future that we can find a way to put them back in so it works, an improved version, let's say, but this time we can't. So we just stick with performance meter. It's occasional use. You could set it up so it only works in, say, mode 4. so you've got time sprint, or you've got distance, and you can convert it differently for different types of fuel, be it American, mile per gallon, Japanese kilometers per litre, lots of different configurations however you need to set it up. Timeout as well, like I said, once we enable the mode, the gauge will display that you're in that mode by, I think, -- while the time while the performance time is running, and then afterwards it will display for 20 seconds the actual performance time, so maybe 0 to 60, 5 seconds. It will show for 20 seconds before reverting back to your fuel gauge. Okay, that pretty much covers the RaceROM functionality for BRZ. We have speed density, okay, for BRZ as well. So, yeah, I must go over this. Speed density, same as with STI at this time. Speed density is a mass airflow base table again. We've made it bigger than it is on the STI. Calibrated in our own car, very accurate. Really good tuning results actually. We've been doing some forced induction cars with superchargers and turbochargers, and the results have been very good. One of the things to watch out for them is the issue with the VVT not working. BRZ has dual VVT, and should the exhaust cam not work like it doesn't for the first 20-30 seconds after starting, it does affect the VE and it will affect the speed density table. We're going to work on a way of improving this. Main thing is the feature's available now. It works bloody well, and it helps us do math scaling, accurate math scaling again. So don't be afraid to use it, but equally I know weaknesses in it that are not EcuTek weaknesses, but they're fundamental weaknesses, and we can work to improve that longer term. Speed density again is a hybrid configuration. You can set it up against, you can have it working so it only works over a certain mass airflow, over a certain manifold pressure, a certain RPM. Temperature compensation again, as per the STI, and the throttle delta compensation again to apply enrichment factors on mass airflow, therefore engine load for throttle movement. Okay, I think that pretty much covers the RaceROM features on BRZ, with the exception of custom maps. Now, custom maps, very powerful. We're very proud of custom maps. It's an amazing feature, but we're going to cover custom maps on its own webinar because there's a lot to talk about with custom maps and what can be achieved by using custom maps. Anybody wanting to know more information on the custom maps, please have a look. It's got its own help PDF that's on your laptop, would have been downloaded. I think at this time it's only officially released for custom maps, only officially released for BRZ. There's the custom maps PDF. There's this specific RaceROM help file for the RaceROM features on BRZ. The custom maps is an overview. We're beta testing for the GTR at present, and that will be the next one that's available. Okay, you guys have probably been emailing lots and lots of questions in. I'm afraid I haven't got to see them all. X has been watching some of them. We're going to move on now to, how long have we been going? Oh, an hour and a half already, so I've stepped things up. The next one is big subject on its own, so I'm going to do that one next, and then the ones thereafter are where we've got Nissan Juke, which will be a lot more simple, Evo 10, 370Z, Mazda Speed, Mazda MPS, and Colt CZT. There's not the advanced functionality that we've got on things like the BRZ, STIs and GTRs. So I'll do the GTRs next, and then if you can bear with us, if you're interested, the other ones have the same features but just less of them basically. So oh, sorry, we haven't done live data. Yes, you're right. We got to custom data logging and then skipped off. So BRZ, very important. Again, custom data logging. We got lots of stuff to log. All the stuff in red. EcuTek custom parameters shown here. You can see the usual ones that we have with STI, engine load, advanced multiplier, torque actual, output of the calculated torque maps, so we know what the car's running. MAF voltage, quite a few tuners, they want to know MAF voltage over what the mass airflow grams is, so there it is again. Manifold pressure delta, change of manifold pressure, so we can measure for things like forced induction turbocharger, how quickly the turbos come in, put compensation factors in through custom maps for rate of pressure change. Throttle delta, as discussed earlier. MAF sensor, grams per second, say, really important that one. If you're putting a different MAF tube on a BRZ86, you can make a perfect MAF scale. You take your modified intake. If you can get access to a stock car, get your stock car, enable speed density, car will run fine, log the mass airflow sensor output. This value will be lower because more than likely your MAF tube is bigger, and then you just increase your MAF tube, your 2D MAF scaling to match your speed density. Your mass airflow in grams shown, mass airflow here. This mass airflow will be from your speed density map. If this is reading say 100 grams, car's running fine because the speed density map was calibrated here on a stock car. Then the MAF, you've got a bigger MAF tube, maybe your MAF grams is only 20. So you look at your MAF voltage on your 2D MAF scale. At 3 volts it's only reading 80, but I know that we should be at 100 because our speed density mass airflow is 100. Just increase the map at that point. You can do a MAF scale in 2 pulls, 2 flashes really. And the first one is the calibration, the second one probably verification, small fine trim. Boost pressure enables us to read over 1.2 bar absolute factory naturally aspirated limit. Gear, we can tell what gear we're in. This is exciting. Wheel speed, we can measure per wheel speed. This is really useful with custom maps, and we're going to do a traction control, like a RaceROM traction control, where we can control each wheel speed and adjust the torque accordingly to stop wheel slip on rear-wheel drive. Steering wheel angle, we can apply all sorts of exciting factors, including G-force for the traction control. Braking force, how hard we're pushing the pedal. These are all deselected by us, by EcuTek, because they're not needed most of the time. The only custom ones that we do log is engine load, advanced multiplier, map switch mode. If you find on a regular basis that you need to be logging at one of the other ones, and this needs to be a global thing for all dealers, then let us know and we'll add it in. If you think that we should be adding gear in as a default logging parameter, let us know and we can add them in. Okay, custom parameters. So the digital, for technical reasons, we can't log the digital switches, the on-off switches at this time, but we can visually see them in the log file. So we can see when the traction control flag is set, it will show on-off, and stability control, when the stability control's kicked in, on-off. PI is abbreviation for port injector. We can tell when the port injector open time is milliseconds out. I think it's actually microseconds. But the standard port injector opening time will flatline, the diagnostic parameter will flatline in the Subaru software. EcuTek have gone in and found a custom parameter where we can log it over the standard 6.3 milliseconds, I think it flatlines at. This was needed for cranking enrichment using custom maps and ethanol. And then we have all the custom maps, which again, separate webinar, but we can log the calculation of the custom map, the calculation that's made by RaceROM, and then the output, how it's changed the map, i.e. be that ignition or Vbt or boost control, whatever factor it is, we can measure the output. Okay, so as I say, some of you guys probably want us to talk more on 86. This is a kind of a RaceROM overview webinar, so we are only going to concentrate on the RaceROM part of it, but we do plan to do a dedicated vehicle webinar where literally it will be just on BRZ86 just on GTR, just on STI, but today is specifically on RaceROM feature files. What are they and what are they adding to the ECU? So okay, that's Subaru BRZ done.